Hello, I'm Mark, and welcome back to part 4 of my Unreal Engine tutorial on how to manage your sound mix and sound class settings within your Unreal Engine games. So let's do a quick little recap of what we did in part 1, 2, and 3. So in part 1, we went ahead and defined our sound classes and our sound mix class. Then in part 2, we went ahead and defined our sound mix override table structures, our saved volume structure, and then our core sound mix override class, which we'll be using to manage all of that. And then in part 3, we went ahead and integrated our sound mix override class into our game instance as well as into our user widget, and then set up our sound mix table and then tested it all out. So what we're going to do in our fourth and final part, we'll be wrapping up this tutorial by creating an audio settings screen so that our players can set, save, and load their own sound volume preferences from within the game. So we have a lot of ground to cover in this tutorial, so let's go ahead and get started. So first off, what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create the little save class so that we can tie this into our save system. So to do that, I'm just going to go ahead and create a little folder and name it save system. And then within there, we're just going to go ahead and go to blueprints. And under all classes, we're just going to say save. And then there's our save game object. So this is the object we use to save all of our information when we want to save and load game data. So we'll do that. We'll call it bp underscore my save game. And we'll go ahead and open this up. So all we need to do in here, once we have this created, is to go ahead and create a variable called player volumes. And under there, I'm just going to go ahead and set this to our save. There's our save class, save volume, sound volumes. Gonna go ahead and then make this instance editable, expose on spawn. Go ahead, compile and save. Now everything in here is good to go. So let's go ahead and start building that audio settings screen. So I'm just going to go ahead and close this. So to do that, I'm going to come down. I'm going to go into our UI folder, and under here, I'm just going to say new folder, and I'm going to bring in a background image. So to do that, I'm just going to create a little assets folder, so that we can hold these kind of art assets. And then I'm just going to come over, and I already have something picked out, so I'm just going to go drag it. I'm just going to drop it in here, let Unreal Engine do its thing, and there it is. So I'm just going to go do that, hit save, so we can save it all. Alright, so I've got this nice little hexagonal background, and that's what we're going to use. What I'm going to use, you feel free to find whatever image you want for your background. So let's go ahead and create our audio settings widget. So first off, we're going to go ahead and come to user interface, come down to widget blueprint. So in part 3, we went ahead and added this information to our system user widget class here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go find that class, and we're going to go ahead and create our widget off this class versus the default. And I'm going to call it WB audio settings, and then we'll just go ahead and open that up. I'm going to hit save. Let's go and maximize this screen. So now that we've got this created and we've got this set up, let's go ahead and start building out the layout for our audio screen. So first off, we're going to need a canvas panel. So there's our canvas panel. We'll just go ahead and drop that in there. And we'll center that. And then once we have the canvas panel, I'm going to go ahead and find an image so that we can create use this as our background image. So I'm just going to drag that, drop that on the canvas panel. And then for the image, we're just going to go ahead and set our anchors. So I'm going to come down, I'm going to hold Shift, and then also I'm going to go and right Control and Shift, which will then blow that up. So that whole image is now going to take up the whole screen. All right, so now let's go ahead and put our image in there. So to do that, we just come up to Appearance, Brush, and we can go find, and there it is. There's our hex image. I'm just going to go compile and save, and so there's our background taking up the whole screen. All right, so next up, I'm going to just give this a title. So to do that, I'm just going to find some text. So there's a text. I'm just going to add that to the canvas panel. And within the text block, let's go ahead and just move this a little bit, put it there. I'm going to call this audio settings. And let's go ahead and I'm just going to check my other solution, see what we did. Fonts. Let's make this bold italic and set this to 100 so it's nice and big. All right, and then let's set the, and then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to use this size to content, so that auto sizes our box to the size of the content. So once that's done, let's see, yeah, that looks pretty good there, so I'm just going to keep that there. All right, so next let's go ahead and create our volume slider controls. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and get a vertical box. And there we are, our vertical box. I'm just going to drag that down. There's our vertical box container. I'm going to go ahead and move this into the screen. And for this, I'm just going to go ahead to anchors, and I'm just going to go shift, hold, and anchor it so it stays centered within the screen. And then I'm just going to drag it out and try and just manually size it like so. All right, so this is going to hold our slide controls for our volume settings. I'm going to hit save, and the reason why I just used the first one, I just used the wide anchors, is so that if this screen changes sizes, this should auto change as well. So that's why we did it that way. Okay, so let's go ahead and build our slide controls. So to do that, I'm going to use a horizontal box. So I'm going to use a horizontal box, and I'm going to put the horizontal box in the vertical box. And then within there, I'm going to need a text box so I can label it. So there's our text box. I'm then going to use a spacer. And there's our spacer, and I'm just going to use the default space. And then finally, I'm going to use a slide control, which will allow our players to be able to decide how much volume or how little volume they want. And there we are. I'm just going to use this. And there we are. So, all right, now that we got this, let's go ahead and just go and configure all of this up. So I'm going to set the, let's go to text first. I'm going to auto that. Go to text, start with the text. This can stay the way it is because we're not changing the text on the fly. This is I'm going to make this the master volume. So this is going to be our master volume control, and I'm going to make this bold, and we'll make this 48, and I'm going to set this to fill. And let me just take a look at my other solution real quick, and I'm going to set this to 4. All right, so that's set to fill. That looks good, and all of this looks good. Letter spacing, not making any changes there. All right, so I'm going to hit compile and save real quick. Then I'm going to come over to the slide control. Now the slide control is going to be a variable, and I'm just going to let it call it slider and master, since this is the master slide control. And in order to space it and size it, all I'm going to do is I'm going to say go to fill, and I'm going to set this to 6 instead. So there we are. So that's 4 and that's 6. Oh, I'll tell you what, let's just go ahead and justify that in the middle so it looks good. There we go. And there's the slider. And here we're just going to go ahead. I'm just going to make this, let's just make this 1. Actually, let's just make it 0.5. So it's nicely in the middle there. Hit save. Okay, we're not going to do any bindings on this. We'll control all of this from within, from within the graph back there. So just taking a look, making sure there's nothing else I want to change. I think we're good. Yep. All right, so that's our first control. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and duplicate this. So this is our master volume. And then what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate it for our child controls for music and effects. So to do that, I'm just going to right click, say duplicate, and right click, and then say duplicate. So we just duplicate 2 more times. This is not master volume. This is going to be music. So that will control our music. And I don't think I need to say volume on this, so we'll just keep music. And this one down here will be effects. There and there. And then on the sliders, it's not massive. Yeah, this is be slider music. And this one will be slider effects. All right, cool. Now that's done. Let's go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and add 2 buttons. I'm going to have the save button as well as a back button. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm just going to go, let's find our button controls. So I'm going to go drag our button control, and I'm just going to drop it onto the canvas. And it will bring the button control down here. So this will be our back button. Just gonna go find the back button over here. So, all right, and then within the back button, let's add a text so we can label it. All right, and I'm just gonna go ahead and just call this button back. And I am going to then say size to content, and then we'll go to the content, which is the label, and just call this back. And let me take a look at, and let's go change the color to black, since black on gray is a little bit better than white on gray. And lastly, I'm going to click on the button, and I'm going to go ahead and set the anchors. So I'm going to hold Shift, and I'm going to anchor it to the left lower corner. And then I'm going to go ahead and pull the anchor again, and I'm just going to hit Control. So it'll update the position, and then finally I'm just going to go grab it and just move it to roughly where I want it to be, which is right there. And I'm going to hit compile, save, and then I'm just going to go on here. I'm going to hit right click, and I'm just going to say duplicate again. So we just duplicate that button. I'm going to right now I'm just going to go ahead and change the anchors on this. So I'm going to put this on the other side and doing the same pattern. Just manually adjust it, and then here instead of back I'm going to call this save, and then we'll go into the content and just relabel this. So we'll call this apply and save. All right, and then that I think should do it for the layout. I'm just double check. Looks like everything is there. I think the only thing I'm probably going to want to do is on here. Or is it on the horizontal box? Let's add some spacing to this. Give it a little padding all around. Maybe a little bit more, and then I think we'll be good. Yeah, I think 5 looks good. Alright, so now it's all spaced out and padded out. Let's go ahead and start wiring this screen up. So I'm going to go over to the graph. Okay, so let's take a look. Right now, we don't need the pre-construct, and I don't need event tick. I will need the construct, but let's just taking a look at my other solution right now. All right, so the first thing I think we should do is we should go ahead and create the I'm going to create the load and saving functions, since they're going to be needed for everything else. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to pull this back a little bit, go right and say add custom events. So this one's going to be the load settings. Event. And so the load setting event, so this will allow us to load our audio settings and so let's go ahead and set that up. So the first thing we're going to do is we need to first see if we have a save file, and if we have a save file, then if we do, then we'll want to load our settings from the save file. If we don't, we'll just take them from the default settings that we've decided, from the sound mix override table. So does save game exist? So here we need to have a save game slot. So to do that, I'm just going to go create a variable. Call it save slot, and we'll make it a string. And for compile save, and we'll just call it save game 1. So we'll use that as our save slot for all of this. I'm just going to go drag, get, and just tie it in there. All right, so here we need to just branch this out. So this is so if we have this file, right, then we're going to go ahead and use it. So to do that, we'll come up here, we're going to say load game from slot. And what slot? And it's going to be this slot. And then after that, we'll go ahead and, so this is going to return our save class. So we're going to then need to cast this. So we'll say cast to so we'll cast this to the save game object. And then once we've cast this, so it's like if the cast is good, then we just need to then say, okay, get the player volumes. And there it is. So there's our player volumes. And so then I'm just going to go do this. I'm just going to go ahead and break them. break the struct so we can see what's inside. And then all we need to then do is just set our sliders to the values that are here. So we'll go slider master music, get slider. I'm going to say set value and say master goes to master. So that will go there. And then we do the same thing for music and effects. Just setting this up, making sure it's nice and neat. So that's our music, and then same thing for effects. Effects, go to effects. And there we go. And I'm just going to link that up. And then finally, what we want to do is when we load this in, we'll just go ahead and set the sound so we can actually hear it. You know, we can hear it at those volumes. So lastly, so to do that, since we're using our system user widget, all we have to do is just, we need to say get sound mix override, since we already now have that there, and that's already been done on the initialization in the code. And from here we can just say update sound mix override. And so then what we're going to update it with, we're just going to update it with the player volumes. So we'll just connect those in. So now that we're getting player volumes, we will use the player volumes and not the data table. And then let's go find the mix that we want to use. So to do that, I'm just going to come back, go to audio, go to sound mix, come into our table, and I'm just going to use the default list. So we'll just copy that and come back to settings. I'll just move that there. And there it is. So I'm just going to hit save, compile, and that's if we have a save file. So if we don't have a save file, then we just need to come down the other tree. So to do that, we're going to come down here and we're going to say get sound mix override. And then here we're just going to say get, I'm going to say get current overrides. So this is a function that we created on our sound mix override class to be able to pull back whatever the current set is, and for that it's going to be the default list. So we've got that and it's coming back in the array. So from there all we need to do is loop through the array, do a for each on the array. And then from here, we're going to then take this out, and we can then break this. And we have this enumerator here. So I'm going to just go ahead and use this as a way of being able to find our value. So from there, I'm going to say get a switch. So we'll link the switch to the body. And as you can see, we have none music and effects. So all we need is the music and effects. We don't need to worry about the master, because by default, if we don't have this, then we'll assume that the master is going to be set to 1. So actually we should just go back into our designer and come back up to here, and I'm just going to go ahead and set this to 1 by default. So, alright, so now all we need to do is we just need to get these two. I'm just going to copy those, and I'm just going to break this link. music and effects. So there's music. There's effects. And then I just need to pull this out, and we'll just put volume and volume. And this will just map everything out. So again, here I just need to use one loop. I don't need to do a loop within a loop using that enum. That's defined there. Okay, and then lastly, once the loop is complete, we want to then go ahead and say set our sound mix. So I'm just going to go ahead and just copy this, paste that here, link the complete. So when the loop completes, then we'll go ahead and enforce it. And we don't need to put anything into volumes, since we're telling it to use the table values and not these sound preferences, since we don't have any sound preferences saved. And then I'm just going to go ahead and say hide unconnected. Make it a little neater there. Alrighty, and that's just load settings. Do one final check. Make sure that we're not missing anything. No, looks good. Looks good. Okay, so then the next thing I'm going to do is let's do the opposite and do the save audio settings. So we'll just call this, create a custom event, and we'll give it a name. We'll call it save settings. And here all we're going to do is just save our slider preferences when this gets called. So to do that, we're just going to say come back here, we're going to say create save. So we need to create a save game object, and that object is going to be of the blueprint class that we created there. And then from here I'm going to say promote this to a variable, and we'll call this save game instance. And yeah, I'll just go ahead and just say put a little ref there to know that it's a reference. Okay, and then from here we now have this class. So now what we need to do is we need to now set the player volumes within the class. So I'm just going to drag this out and say set player volumes, and connect that. And then I'm going to pull this out, and then I'm going to say make volumes. So first thing we need to do is I need to make sure that if we're going to be making this class, I'm going to set this flag to true. That way this is no longer a set for default. It means that we want to now take whatever I put into here as the save volumes. So I'm going to hit save, and then all it is just the reverse of what we did up there. And setting the volumes, now we're just going to go get these slider controls. So first I'll get the master, and then we'll say get the value, and we'll just link that in there. And then we'll do the same thing for music. I'm just going to go ahead and just get these get the value, and this one get the value, and then we'll just link those right into there. So there we go. Alright, I'm going to hit compile and save. Then once we have these and once we've set this, now we just need to then save it. So to do that, we will then say we will go ahead and get this guy, and from here I'm going to then say save game to slot, And I'm just going to use the synchronous version versus the asynchronous since this is coming from a screen. So we'll just connect that, we'll connect the object, and then we'll go get the slot ID. And there we have it. And then finally, we'll just go ahead and run the update so that the game uses the new preferences that we've applied and saved. So we'll do that, and then I'll just run this right off the make volume. And that should be it for saving and loading. So now let's go ahead and start tying this to the buttons and tying this to the event construct. So I'm just going to move our event construct up. So on construct, we're just going to go ahead and load. So I'm just going to call this and say load settings, and there it is. So that's it. That's all we need to do there. Hit compile, save. All right, so next I'm going to do the, I'm going to click on the back button here, and then I'm just going to come down here in the events and say on click. So this is going to be the on back event. So on back, what I'm going to do is, so when I hit the back, so when I call this screen, I'm actually going to pause the game. So when I hit the back button, we want to unpause the game. So I'm going to say set game pause, and we'll leave this empty so it will unpause the game. And then I'm going to then do the get player controller, and next is going to be the show mouse cursor. And we're just going to go ahead again, set that to false since we don't want the mouse cursor when we close the screen. And then from here I'm going to then say set input mode to game only. To game only. And I'll just put a little reroute node there. And then finally, we'll go ahead and remove from parent. And there it is. So that's the sequence of events that we'll be doing when we close this screen by hitting the back button. So then the next is going to be the save button. So let's go ahead and get the button save. We'll do the same thing, come down to events, on click the little plus button. It'll auto create that for us. And all we're doing here is just calling the save, or save audio settings, or save settings. There it is. And that's all we need to do there. So compile, save. Let me just check real quick, make sure everything looks the same. Yep, and I'll bring the construct down there. And that should be it for the audio screen. So let's just hit, make sure everything's saved, compiled. All right, so now that we've got our screen and it's all set up and wired up, let's go ahead and have it so that we can call it from within the game. So to do that, first off, we need to create a new game. We need to create a key binding. So we're going to come into our content drawer. We're going to come down to third person, input, actions, and let's go ahead and create a new enhanced input. So we're going to come to do that, right click, and come to input, input action, IA, and we'll call this and that's all we need to do there. I think we can keep the default settings. I don't need this thing to be called from, well, I'll just call that anyway, why not? So that's all we need to do. I'm just going to go ahead and say triggered when paused, just in case I want to then change it so that I can have a pause key to close it as well. But for now, we'll do that. And then we just need to then map it in our defaults. So here, we're going to create a new mapping. And then under the mapping, let's go ahead and find our audio settings. And I'm just going to go ahead and click the little key here, and I'm going to assign it to the K key. And that should be it. Nothing else we need to do there. All right, now that we have all of that, let's go ahead and add this to our player character. So I'm just going to come into the blueprints, come to third person character, open that up. So as you can see from our previous, we had, this is what we did to load in that music selector screen. So we'll do something a little bit similar, but when it comes to audio settings, but since we have the back button, we don't need to worry about this half of the tree. So, but let's go ahead and do that. So enhanced input. So I'm going to say AI underscore audio settings. This will give us a new enhanced input. We're just going to say take the default. And I'm going to run this off start instead of off triggered. And let's just go ahead and say is valid. And if not valid, we'll go ahead and say let's create the widget. So we'll do that, create the widget. And which widget are we going to be creating? We're going to be creating our audio settings widget, which is there. And let's go ahead and assign this to the player controller. So there, that's the owning player, is this player controller. And from here, let's go ahead and say, once this is created, I'm just going to say promote to variable. Let's give it a name. And then I'm just going to come back and just drag, say get, whoops, no, not set, get, and just hook that right in there. So if this has not been defined, then we'll go ahead and create it. Otherwise, if it's already been created, we'll just keep going with what we have in memory. That way we're not having to create this screen over and over and over again. All right, so then from here, we're just going to then say, once we have this, we're just going to say add to viewport. And from here, we'll also say add to viewports. And just drag that over. Oh, and I'm going to say break that. And we'll just go ahead and just hold that there. All right. So now all we need to do is just say if this is all good, then we just need to pause the game and then go ahead and switch the game mode. And that's the only thing left. So from here we'll say set pause game. And this time we'll check it so we can pause it. And then after this I'm going to say get controller. Get player controller. And then we are going to show the mouse. Check that checkbox. And then after that, we'll then say set input mode. and we'll just pick the game and UI. So that's the one we want. We'll just drag this over, drop it, and we'll just put a little reroute node, make it a little cleaner. I'm going to grab the audio settings. This is the one, this is what we want to have focus, and everything else should be good. Alright, so let's compile it, save it, and let's just do a quick little test to make sure it shows up. So I'm just going to move this off screen temporarily. Go ahead and hit the play button, and if I hit the K, there it is, and if I hit back, we're back. And as you see, it automatically went and changed our settings when we brought up the screen to those defaults. So I'm going to go ahead and stop that. Alright, so now that we've got that taken care of, we've tied that into the screen. I'm just going to go and minimize that. So next, let's go ahead and also tie in our saving system and load, our loading system, I should say, our save and loading system into our map page, and we should also tie it into our override triggers too, so everything tests out. So let's go into our map. I'm just going to go to here, open level blueprint, which will open up the level blueprint. So this is all holdover from when we did our music player. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is we're just going to call load sound settings, and loading sound settings will come from our core music instance. So I'm just going to grab that. Actually, no, we want to create the load sound settings. So let's go ahead and add that, create that custom event. And it's pretty much very similar to what we did in the screen, but we'll go ahead and just redo this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create that little variable, which is the save slot. And set that to our string. So we'll just compile save. I'm going to come into here, and this is important. We want to make sure that the ID is the same. So come down here and we'll add it over there. So save game one, that's all good. And then after that, all we have to do is just very similar to what we did in the audio settings here. We're just going to go ahead and we can just copy. I'm just going to go ahead and just copy everything up to the cast. So we're going to run this, we'll do this. If it's true, then we'll load, and we have that file, then we'll load it, we'll cast it, and then after we cast, then I'm going to say, okay, let's get the player volumes. Get player volumes. And then all we need to do here is, I'm going to go say get core music game instance, and from here I'm just going to say, so we created a little init map sound override in part 3, and this is where we're actually going to take advantage of that little function. So I'm just going to go move that there. We're just going to put the volume in there, and again I'm just going to come over to audio, and we'll just grab this ID. That's the one we want from the table, so that's the one I'm going to put in there. Compile save, and then I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste this down here. So if this file doesn't exist, then we will just go with the defaults and we will ignore the user volumes. And that should be it from the maps. So then the only other thing that I want to do is I will go ahead and also add the saving and loading system into our trigger as well. So we created this little sound mix trigger. So let's go ahead and open that up. So we're going to do a lot of work in here. Since we now have a saving and loading system. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and first off I'm going to bring in the event begin play. So there's our event begin play, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say get game instance. I'm just going to copy this and this and this to make my life a little bit easier. And from here, I'm just going to say promote this to a variable and hook that up. And we're just going to call this mix override. And compile that. And so now that we have our reference here, when we start the game, we're going to do a lot of changing here. So I'm just going to go ahead and just remove all that. So again, what we're going to do is we're going to do this a very similar thing that we did over here in the third person or in the map. So I'm just going to go grab. I'm actually just going to go ahead and see if I can grab all of this. You know what, I'm just going to grab all of that. We do need the save slot again, so let's go ahead and add that variable into here as well. And again, we need to make sure that we have the right name in there. So let's go ahead and give that a string. Yep, change variable type. Compile, save, put that in there. So that's saved, that's saved. Let's just double check. All right, and let's just hook that to there. Move this down a little bit. I'm going to bring this over. All right, so here we don't need this. Instead, we can just go ahead and grab our reference here and say run the update mix override. And I'm just going to go ahead and just connect that there. So if false, we'll do that. And again, I just want to end. Here we have this override ID. So something a little different. Since these are instance based, we want to make sure we get the right instance and the right ID. So we'll go ahead and hit compile, save, and then again I'm just going to go grab this, copy, bring it over to here. If this is all good, then we just want to put the volumes in. So we're saying don't use the table, use my player's preferences instead. So I'm going to hit compile, we're going to hit save, and I think that is everything. Yep. All right, so let's go ahead and test this all out. So I'm just going to go ahead and move this off screen real quick. So now we're coming back into our game. We've got our testing triggers here, we've got our sounds, and let's go ahead and hit play. So there we are, that's the default. And that's running the default without player preferences. That is very pitchy there. So now let's go ahead and bring in the page. So that's set up and that's applied. So I'm going to go ahead and let's move this to about here. Let's move our effects up. And I'm going to move our master volume down to about there. And as you can see, it's applied those settings. If I move this up a bit more, it gets a little bit louder. But everything is relative to the master volume. So if I really bring all of this down, as you can see, the music suddenly gets very, very quiet. I bring the master volume back up, and everything here is relative to that. So I'm going to then move apply, save, back. And as you can see, I hit the track, I hit that, but it's not changing the volumes because it's now respecting the volume control of the player preferences instead. And as you can see, the pitch goes up, but the volume doesn't. It really is pitchy. And that is that. Okay. So that will conclude my tutorial for the sound mix, sound classes and overrides, as well as creating a audio settings page. If you have made it to the end of my tutorial and my tutorial series, I thank you. And if you like what I'm doing, feel free to like and share my videos, as well as subscribe to my channel. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you. Bye.